Hello, my friends. I do plan to take a lot of calls this hour. And if you'd like to call us, the number is 477-2288 if you're watching us live on May 3rd, 2006. We'll go to your calls in about 10 minutes on any issue you wish to discuss. And, of course, for prisonplanet.tv viewers that are watching this at a later date, we post on the website when the TV show is live, and you're always welcome to call in then if you have any questions or comments. And the toll-free number inside Austin is 477-2288. Outside of Austin, you got to dial 512-477-2288. Okay, there is a lot of news I want to go over in this hour. In the last show I did earlier today, we got into what's really going on with oil prices, how the oil companies, their own documents have been released in the mid-90s through 2000, bought up all of the independent oil refineries, shut them down to create an artificial bottleneck. They are staging this along with the oil cartels themselves, OPEC. But I don't count OPEC as the only cartel. You have BP, Dutch Roll Shell, and other major Western oil companies that are getting a lot out of the Arctic Sea, that are getting a lot by the Bering Strait, Alaska, and other areas. Something I didn't mention, though, in that discussion is very important, and that's also that the dollar has been devalued by roughly 44%. I say roughly because it'll go up to 45, it'll go down to 42, but on average, every time I look at it, it seems to be at about 44%. And that's because they have overprinted the dollar, and the new Federal Reserve Chief says he's going to dwarf what Alan Greenspan did, the former Fed chief, with doubling the money supply just in the last 6 years. Now they're talking about doubling it just in the next 2. He made that announcement, doubling it after the last doubling, and that's called, devaluing the currency. It's called hyperinflation, and it's very, 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 very serious. So if you'd like to talk about energy, we'll be taking your calls on that as well. The Arabs only get about 20% of the profits from the oil. We hear the oil companies only get about 8.6% on average, but that's not really true. Those are deceptive numbers. I want to get into the attack on the Internet. There is a move to kill the Internet. There is a move to regulate the Internet, to restrict the Internet. And I want to go over the public plan to do this that's been in the works for the last decade, but is now accelerating in everyone's face. And why is that happening? Because the alternative media is taking over many of the viewers and listeners and readers of the so-called old line mainstream media. So we'll be talking about that as well. Before I get into Internet 2, I want to just spend a few minutes talking about the illegal alien protest that we have been seeing for the last month plus, over 4 weeks of this behavior going on. Let me first off say I'm not against Latin Americans. I'm not against Southern North Americans. I'm nothing against the Mesoamerican population that is even residing in this country. But they have been propagandized. They have been brainwashed by big U.S. PR firms. The entire La Reconquista Mecha movement is controlled by the Fortune 500. That is part of the public record. The entire demonstrations you've seen in the last 4.5 weeks were paid for and completely staged by Rob Allen & Co., one of the most powerful and successful PR firms, public relations firms in the world. And back in December, it was even in the Dallas Morning News, then in the LA Times, that Fox and Bush had hired Rob Allen & Co. to defeat legislation in Congress and to stage nationwide demonstrations with the illegal aliens to try to politically bully the American people, including the vast majority of Hispanics, into accepting that we have absolutely no border and the massive doubling every 35-year population of Mexico needs to come into the U.S. and drive down wages, which the corporations want, of course. But not just that, we need to break up America and turn the southern and western states into the mythical kingdom of Aslan. Of course, it won't really be that. As soon as the corporations want, they'll start PR funding the illegal groups to suddenly love the New World Order. But the globalists know that using false revolutions is a great way to take control of living space. They've done it in Iran, they've done it in Europe, they've done it in Latin America. They do it over and over again, and people need to get past the propaganda and get a little more sophisticated. So many so-called conservatives followed George Bush and loved George Bush and think George Bush is the best thing since sliced bread because he has a false debate and a false fight with the Democrats. And so people switch off their thinking process and think Bush must be good because he's a good conservative. Democrats think, oh, the Democrats must be good when they're in the hip pockets of the very same global corporations, in some cases even more so than Republicans, and are doing everything to hurt American citizens and our beautiful republic. And but Democrats will defend whatever they do as long as it has that Democratic label on it. We need to get past labels and get into the facts, get into the information, get into the reality. Now, again, I see your calls coming in. We will be getting to your calls coming up here in just a few minutes after I get into what's happening with the Internet. I want to get your take on that. But before we cover it, I was honored to interview Lupe Moreno today, who's running for the state Senate in California. And, of course, she was from Texas, born in Texas. And her father, when she was a little kid, and her grandfather, the illegal aliens, were making fun of them because they would have the American flag out on the 4th of July. They were patriotic. They would say, hey, you're not part of the Raza. That they would come up to him with code words and go, you're not part of the Raza, which means the race. You shouldn't be speaking English. You shouldn't be doing this. You're a traitor. No, English is the world language. The Japanese teach it to their children. The Germans teach it to their children. The Russians teach it to their children. The middle class and wealthy families in Latin America teach it to their children. It is the world language. If Spanish was the world language, I would want us to be speaking Spanish. If the British spoke Spanish and America was Spanish speaking to begin with, after it was colonized, then I would be for that. And then there's all these calls for, well, this is really Mexico, or this belongs to the primitive peoples. This belongs to the Native Americans. Well, the La Reconquistas, the Mexicans, the La Reconquista crowd, they identify out of the hundreds of American tribes from Alaska to Chile, they identify with one particular tribe that rose in prominence about 1,000 years ago and was one of the most destructive in Mesoamerican history, and that was the Aztecs. So out of all these cultures, they don't say we're adopting the Comanche culture, the Apache culture, the Blackfoot culture. We're not adopting the Iroquois culture. We're adopting the most disgusting, degenerate, evil culture that sacrificed their own children, their own women, so many that it decimated their own population. So many that just a few hundred conquistadors could take over against hundreds of thousands. I mean, there's all, and there's Latin American, today, cultures that aren't related to the Aztecs, but are related to primitive tribes who aren't nearly as evil and out of control. And I don't want to hear that it's just a culture and I can't make a judgment about a culture being evil. I believe the Soviet culture under Stalin was evil. The guy killed over 50 million people. That's admitted. I believe the Chinese culture under Mao was evil. I'm not saying the Chinese culture is evil. I'm saying the communist culture is evil. The one that kills political dissidents, Falun Gong, for their organs. The ones that force all Tibetan women to marry Chinese military. Tibetan women are not allowed to marry Tibetans. It's genocide. The British did this to the Scots. That's a real quote from Longshanks that you see in Braveheart. He even wrote a letter concerning it. He said, if we can't kill them out, we'll breed them out. That's an evil culture. The Nazis. Oh, I can't make a judgment. They weren't an evil culture? Yes, black uniforms, skull and bones, insignia, running around murdering people, invading their neighbors. All I'm trying to say here is that I've studied this issue. I know about the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. I know about Juan Navarro, who was really the father of Texas, and when he died in 1870-something, there was weeping in the streets. He wrote the Constitution. I know that over 30% of right at a third, of the founders of Texas, the people that fought, were Hispanic. I know that the Mexicans had tried to sell Texas to President Jackson years before. The Mexicans couldn't hold this state from the Comanche and from the Red Sticks. That was an eastern tribe out of Louisiana. They couldn't hold it from French raids. They couldn't deal with it. They tried to sell it. There were only a few thousand Mexicans in Texas, and that was mainly in the southern area. one of the most northern points of it being San Antonio. And they had been given their land grants, Spanish land grants. My family paid, what was it, 13 cents and 10 cents, depending on which grant it was. The Spanish government in 1829 for their land. The Hispanic Texians, they paid for it. And then suddenly, Santa Anna, a dictator, took over, and he said, you don't have voting rights anymore. We're merging you with the Mexican states south of you, and we're going to confiscate your guns. Now, Americans, when we were British subjects, told King George III, you can have a war over gun confiscation. That's what finally struck the match on Patriots' Day, April 19th, at Lexington and Concord in 1775. And then a year later, you have the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. It's the same thing here. Mike Hansen's from Gonzales, Texas. He's got family there. The Hispanics and whites all get along. They intermarry. You have these cultures where the Czechs won't intermarry with Germans, but the Czechs would intermarry with Mexicans. Where the Germans wouldn't marry a Czech, because you get these old European rivalries, but they get along with Mexicans. Everything's been going just fine in this state. Comparatively speaking, to the racism in Mexico. Did you know in Mexico, blacks, and I've talked to black Mexicans, they have less rights and are treated worse than blacks were here in the 1930s. And I had a man from L.A., Terry Anderson, talk show host, who's black from there. I mean, there's areas of L.A., if a black man walks down one block, he'll be called mayata, and excuse the term, nigger. And mayata's blackbird. It's the same thing in Spanish. Over and over and over again. See, that's acceptable. That's okay. Then you watch Mexican TV. It's all blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, most of them, or they've got brown hair and blue eyes. And that's what you see. You go look at the Mexican government's Congress, Schmidt, Jones, Hammond, Berger, Jewish names, German names, a lot of German names. The Germans tried to colonize Mexico. A lot of people don't know that. And they're like 6'6", 6'7", like Vicente Fox. Fox isn't a Mexican name, by the way. It's Jewish. I don't know why anybody, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, that he is Jewish. And you've got all these people running around, ruling on every Mexican TV show I see, and I watch them. The Indian, 5'2" person is the fool, is the idiot on the show. These blonde-haired people laugh at them. So I don't want to hear it anymore about racism. Mexico is a cesspit of racism and evil. A cesspit of corruption. A cesspit of mordido and kickbacks and king rats and people abusing their population. There needs to be a revolution in Mexico. There needs to be a revolution against that tyranny. Mexico, conservatively, this is in the encyclopedia, has on average triple the resources of entire lower 48. Triple the resources. That's on average. They have, 4 times the oil we have. It's over 3 times the gold. But when you average it all together, it's 3 times, these are official numbers, the resources. They have more billionaires than any other country in the world. And I don't mean per capita. The other day I said per capita, and I thought that sounded wrong. I went and looked it up. No. They have more billionaires than America, than the U.S. They have more billionaires than Switzerland. They have more billionaires than Germany. They have more billionaires than Russia and then Japan. Do you understand that North Korea is the most corrupt and the most evil? China, in numbers of mass killings and torture, is the worst. But when you talk about an elite where it is the most top-down, like in an ancient European or Byzantine society before that, I shouldn't even say ancient, in a medieval or even Renaissance, it was a structure like this. Pyramid. That's why the New World Order symbol's a pyramid. A huge mass at the bottom, living at subsistence level or below, starving. Another group barely living above subsistence level, a very small middle class, and then a functionary elite for the elite, and then the tiny elite, less than 1/10 of 1%. In Mexico, I ought to think about the graph, the way to draw this out. It's like it's a giant slab of marble, huge slave mass. It's not a pyramid, with a tiny pinnacle, just a little piece sticking up way high. So imagine you have this huge mass of slaves, not a pyramid. It's a huge slab with a tiny little thing the size of, I guess, like a drumstick or a chopstick just sticking up above it. Just a tiny, I mean, go look at these numbers. I'm trying to put it in, perspective just with a little illustration here. Think about that. There's no country on earth. And you know why their elite stays in power? Because they're slick, folks. They're very slick. In fact, it's one of the only pure colonial countries left in the world. Yeah, the Spanish got kicked out, and the Germans and the French got kicked out. They all tried to be emperors and take over there. None of it worked, and you just got, what do they say, it's about 14 families or so, and then a few allied families under them. I mean, they own that whole place, man. There are people who own hundreds of thousands of acres. Pemex is, quote, government, but it's only owned by a few families. Triple the oil that we have. And you know what they've been doing for 50 years? They print up textbooks and comic books for the kids saying, America's evil, the Southwest belongs to you, you're going to take over. And since I've been studying the La Reconquista, I have learned where all this came from. And look, my mother's side of the family's, German on both sides. Nothing against Germans. Nothing against the British when I criticize their corruption. Nothing against the Mexicans when I do. But people say, Alex, we always bash on the Germans. I'm sorry, I'm just covering history here. Okay? World War I, they came in and created a liberation theology and tried to get Hispanics in southern Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California to rise up and kill the whites with the promise of making the Southwest part of Mexico again. When again, Mexico never really had it and couldn't hold it and couldn't keep it. I mean, the Russians even had it before they did in California. I mean, nobody could keep it. That's why it's the Six Flags of Texas. A bunch of countries had this place. They couldn't keep it. It took the Tennessean and the Kentuckian and the South Carolinian European settlers who've been fighting Indians for 4 generations in some cases to come in. It took people like Andrew Jackson. Whether you, again, like that or hate that, giving you history. But what was the point I was getting to before I digressed onto that? I was, let me backtrack because I got off into some other history. Oh, the Germans. They come in, and this is public. It's not just the plan of San Diego. I've been reading Mexican translations, official history books, and official papers from UT and the University of Mexico at Mexico City. They're quite proud of this. Why do you think Dos Equis says German brewmaster? Why do you think the railroads were built by Germans? Germany really tried to have an influence there in the last 150 years. The Germans came in during World War I, even before we got into the war with the sinking of the Lusitania and Woodrow Wilson. And they came to them and they said, we're going to give this to you. Help us stage an invasion. And they paid them millions of dollars and printed up the pamphlets. It's funny how that just grew and grew and grew and grew. Then the Ford Foundation in the 60s, the money of the late Henry Ford, the big Nazi supporter. Remember? See how this just went and had visits with Hitler. Gave Hitler like $1 million prize in gold. Remember all that? The head of Thomas Watson, the head of IBM, big Nazi. It's all in my film, Martial Law. So understand what's happening here. This is real. This isn't debated. They launch an attack in 1918 into South Texas, and in one night, is it 21 or 24, Americans are killed. But they were only supposed to kill white men above 16, but you start killing, you can't. So there were like Charles Manson-style killings, where they were killing babies, women. There were killings in California, killings in Arizona, houses getting burned down. A lot of the illegals chickened out and just burned houses. And then, of course, it was a horrible racist backlash against Hispanics who'd done nothing, who were good Americans. And they hired former World War I war criminals. There have even been PBS specials on this. Deputized them as Texas Rangers. They went down with Gatling guns, killed hundreds of Hispanics, rode them down, killed them. So, see, this is how race war starts. The Germans come. Okay, the U.S. and the Marines takes the southwestern states. Mexicans don't really like it, but they never really held it, so it shouldn't have been a blow to their pride. And they have a treaty, and we buy it. And then later the Marines go down and capture Mexico City. Once you get into, yes, can you imagine how much we would dislike Mexicans as Americans if they would have gone and captured D.C. 105 years ago or something, or 110 years ago? I mean, so there's some angst involved in all of this, okay? And so there's some legitimate things going on here. But when you put the big picture in play, so then they come and kill a bunch of whites, so then a bunch of Texas Rangers, backed up by war criminal soldiers, people who've been in trouble. The military knows who to hire. Oh, you got court-martialed for killing a bunch of women in Europe. We're going to put you in here. And then so this simmers. Now there's this fear in South Texas. Now Mexicans and whites who've been getting along, forming Tejanos, suddenly they start fighting with each other. Suddenly there is racism towards Hispanics. And so now in the 60s, the Ford Foundation takes those German plans and creates liberation theology. And they don't choose as the Chicanos' mascot some nice, friendly native tribe. They pick the Nazis of Mesoamerica, the evil, conquering Aztecs who killed their own children. I mean, you cannot describe how evil they were, how sick they were. They were Nazis, the equivalent. They were just crazy. It was totally psychopathic. They would take hallucinogenic enemas and then cut their penises off. They would pull huge pieces of rope glass. It's like Hellraiser, folks. Imagine a big hole in your tongue with razor blades going, and I imagine taking your child and on top of chalk mule and ripping their heart out. And the priest eat the heart, and they kick the child down the steps, and the family gobbles their child. I mean, this is as evil as it gets. And what does the Ford Foundation pick as their mascot? The Aztec. They tell them the Southwest is a mythical kingdom of the Aztecs. It's not true. It's the mythical kingdom of the Apache. It's the mythical kingdom of the Comanche, of the Cherokee. So all of this is going on, and I mean, I'm reading the books. I have them. I have La Raza out in the car. All of this is happening. I said I'd take calls. We'll go to them in a minute. And now it's confirmed in local news that they've been attacking police, going into government buildings, physically stabbing people. I have the articles right here. It's not on the national news. Isn't it newsworthy that in Santa Ana, California, the students tried to take the American flag down and rush the police, and the police and teachers had to literally guard the flagpole with hordes of students around them who ransacked the school, and then it's kept quiet? The globalists funded this. Rob Allen and co. funded this. It's admitted that the Ford Foundation took German liberation theology that they'd given because the colonials were good at this. The Germans were colonialists, the Dutch were colonialists, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the British became preeminent because they carried vitamin C on their ships, so their troops were healthy when they got there. Side issue. All of this is happening. All of this is going on. Okay? See, that's the problem with history. There's so many connections here to try to give you this picture. And so then that theology gets picked up in the 60s. It gets amplified. And now Rob Allen and co., hired by George Bush and Vicente Fox, admitted, stage all this to get rid of our borders and have a Pan-American Union just like they have an EU. The poor Mexicans think they're taking over. No, you're just making sure we're all peons. You're just making sure none of us have a future. You're making sure your children don't have a future. You're making sure that the corruption of Mexico, which the globalists love, takes over America. It's so sad. And I have their own documents, and I know they're doing it, and they use this just like a Nazi wouldn't listen. If I'd have sat down with Nazis in 1937 and told them Hitler was bad, they'd go, no, our race, ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one land, one leader. La Raza, one people. For those inside the race, everything. For those outside the race, nothing. You see, Hispanics weren't part of the big 60s civil rights debate. Every culture oppresses others. It's always happening. It's a bad thing. See, they haven't been put through the political correctness mill. And they're not going to be. They're not meant to be. We've got this politically correct black and white population who are all, oh, yes, we're all guilty. Whites, oh, we're all bad. Yes, we're sorry. Oh, you say you're the master race and I must die? Yes, yes, I'm bad. I agree. It's true. Texas Civil Rights Review said, well, Alex Jones is right that there were people out there wearing Plan of San Diego shirts, which means to kill all whites above age of 16, all white males above the age of 16. But, you know, they're a downtrodden people. They're allowed to have those views. Those are, you know, basically those are good views. Alex is bad for pointing them out. I mean, I'm bad. I protest the Klan. But I tell you, the Klan doesn't have George Bush backing them. The Klan doesn't have federal funding. We'll take a call. I said I'd go to calls, and I haven't yet. I want to get into the internet, how they're planning to shut it down. Go ahead, caller.
Hello.
Yes.
Alex, you're so right. I'm an American Mexican. You're so right about the racism going down there with the blacks. They're not accepted down there in Mexico. And now they hate white people. They're not coming to deserve, they're coming to take.
But don't they know they're being manipulated by a federal government that openly wants to break down the U.S.?
Well, I would suggest this, that all the people that I know are talking about maybe the United States should help Mexico and go to dissolve the government and not fight the people.
Well, that's the problem. Our elite loves their elite. It's the elite against us. The elite of Mexico and the U.S. love each other.
Well, the people mean well, but there are certain groups of people that are pocketing the economy. And that's why we need to invade Mexico.
Well, I'll tell you this.
I'll
tell you this.
Mr.
I mean, you're right. You're right.
Mr.
NAFTA and GATT have hurt Mexico worse than it's hurt us.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Jones, real quick now, at these wars that we keep going to across seas and all this, we've already started wars with everybody. Well, at $5 a gallon, we better find a war right next door. $5 a gallon. You know what I mean? And it's going to be, well, we can't afford to go over there and fight anybody anymore.
Let me ask you a question. As a Hispanic American, when did you learn about this whole Reconquista thing? When did you start hearing about it?
Well, my grandpa has bullet scars on his, you know, he's dead now, but he had bullet scars on his back, the original wetbacks coming across. Things were deserved back then. You had to stand in line and deserve America. Well, that's over. With 20 other million people coming now, you're losing. You're losing big time. I'm an American. I have to speak up. I love America. They're coming to get us. We have to invade Mexico in order to make the economy correct, where they'll stay there and work there for their own country.
Well, I mean, did you know Mexico has triple the resources?
Well, they got the clean water. They got the oil. And they don't have a government. That's why everybody's running. There's not going to be anybody left there to run that country.
Well, I would say this. Saddam Hussein did nothing to us. But according to Bush's reasons for national security to invade, I could almost see, you know, if Bush spelled out reasons, they're corrupt, they're evil, but see, he's corrupt too. He's in bed with them. I mean, there are more reasons to invade Mexico than there were to invade Iraq.
Well, I suggest that I hear that the Republicans are at fault here for the huge amount of money we're paying for gas, for these huge Republican contributions they're getting. Are these the Republicans in Mexico that are destroying the country? And George Bush is going to need a top rating now because he's down to what, 30%?
Yeah,
he's going to need to win a war, so he's going to start a war with Iran.
That's right. You can look at good points. You can look at Bush's approval rating. 9/11, Afghanistan starts dropping. Iraq, he needs to get that bump. And that's why they're really gearing up for that. And Iran's done nothing, folks. Every time Israel and the U.S. threaten to attack them, Iran goes, okay, we'll attack you back. And then that's the headline. Iran threatens to attack. It's never the full quote. And I'm not for Iran, folks, but our government overthrew them in 53. They were pro-America, and British Petroleum wanted that oil, so they overthrew them. And I know some of the La Reconquista folks that watch the show that like a lot of it, they don't understand. They go, well, you're talking about the imperialism of America. Alex, see, you should agree with us. No. These global bankers, I've done my studying. They want to get rid of the borders. They want globalism. It's the ultimate form of colonialism. It's global corporations lobbying, getting rid of our governments, merging our countries, destroying our cultures. I've got the Socialist Workers website saying, we're against borders and we're against any colonial borders, and we want to break down America. We stand with the Chicano Reconquista nation. Well, Bush is for it. Bush wants open borders. You see, it shows these global corporations openly funded the socialist movements to con the general public into a movement for the people that's really a movement for the elite. Anything that consolidates wealth in a public war chest can be slurped out by the establishment's proboscis. Go ahead, caller.
In one of your previous, let me turn down my TV. In one of your previous documentaries, you said that you were going to name and identify the leaders of the Mecha, La Raza, and La Reconquista movement. You had them on film and on tape. And I was wondering, not the professors, not the clown at UTA, mind you, but some of the street-level leaders, just so maybe, if we see them on the street, we can say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I was wondering if you might think about doing something like that, and I was wondering if you might wish to protest in front of the Travis County City of Austin Medical Assistance Program facilities that allow illegal aliens to have free health care. And it's on the local level. This is not some kind of federally subsidized program. They get some federal funding, but it's just nominal.
No,
it's mostly local stuff.
No, sir, those are all excellent points. I'm finishing a film right now about government-sponsored terror. What else? And I, at the same time, have got a lot of other irons in the fire. I'm not going to the Reckoning up in Crawford Saturday. I wish I could. The pro-America rally, anti-Bush rally, anti-open border rally. To show how out of touch the La Reconquista, reconquering crowd is, the Mexican supremacist crowd, it's what they are. I mean, seriously, every indicator, every earmark of that. They have signs saying, down with Bush, Bush sent the Minutemen. Bush is calling them vigilantes. He's got the Justice Department going after them. He's trying to shut them down. And these people are going, oh, we hate George Bush. We're going to get you, Bush, and the Minutemen. It's just a total, Bush is funding your rallies. And, yeah, there's the Reckoning for anybody that wants to go to it. Now, we'll also put up some of my websites, Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.com, PrisonPlanet.tv, Infowars.net. We now update JonesReport.com every day. And every day there's news on JonesReport.com that is not on any of the other sites. Most of the sites have pretty much the same news and information on them, just a little, but every site has something a little different each day. 2 or 3 things that are exclusive to that site. Reason to visit them all. Let's take one more call, and I'm going to get into what's happening with the internet, and then back into your calls. There's so many facets to why to illustrate why the illegal aliens get special treatment. When most Americans' forebears came here, Ellis Island, if you had TB, you were treated before you were let in. If you had other serious diseases, the government cared about the population. Didn't matter if you were black or white. We had different management in those days. Government was never perfect, but there was some good old boy corruption. But nothing like it is now. Just diabolical. Illegal aliens are pouring across at the tune of 3 million a year. Illegal, around 1 million legal. And then only about 1 million go back each year. So that's a total increase of 3 million. Legal and illegal. Here's a federal number that I saw late last year in the Associated Press. There were 3 cases of leprosy in the United States. 3 cases of leprosy in the decade preceding. Do you know how many cases of leprosy there were in 2004? Because you get these numbers a year later. We got it in 2005. God knows what it'll be in a few months when it comes out for 2005. Guess how many cases there were of leprosy in the United States? Guess how many? Over 7,000. And Texas was number one. There is now a leopard colony outside Palestine, Texas, in East Texas. We now have leper colonies. And I don't care if your child's Hispanic, if they're black, if they're white. Do you want your children sitting next to these illegal alien children while they're coughing TB on them? Drug resistant or drug immune? You know that every few days there's TB deaths in Austin. Did you know, but the media keeps it real quiet. Did you know there's already TB wings at hospitals? Did you know that you have a very good chance if you go into the Austin jail of getting TB? Do you know what is it? One person in a year on average will infect like 44 people with TB. TB is exploding all over the country. Drug-resistant other diseases, venereal diseases that have never been in the U.S. are now here. I mean, nasty stuff, folks. And that's because Russians and Chinese and Africans, but mainly Latin Americans. We always talk about Latin Americans because that's the majority here. It's over 80% of the immigrants here now. And there's no testing, no nothing. And then when they do figure out they're sick, they just go and get free health care. I don't get free health care. In fact, give me a close shot in here. You see this finger? I cut it off. It was flopping by skin. It was all just mangled. It was flopping by a piece of skin over on this side. About 2 years ago, I'm out fishing with a friend, Kevin Booth. We see some Arab guys, because I'm such an evil white racist. We see some Arab guys, because, all white people are bad. I see some Arab guys out on the back of a rented pontoon boat, and they can't get the thing started. And in the middle of the lake, waves from both sides are about 3 feet. It's the biggest swell I've ever seen out there. But just in that part of the lake from all the wakes of the boats, it doesn't. Why am I telling you that part? It doesn't matter. I image things and then just tell you what I'm remembering. And so I pull up and try to help them, and they don't really speak a lot of English. They ask, can I help? Well, I can't tie up to them, so I jump in, and I go, and their boat's off, and I start climbing up the side. I'm a big fat boy, as you know. And I start climbing up out the side, and there's that little metal door that swings, and I fall with all my weight, and it just basically breaks the finger off and pulls the finger off. Well, I get it and kind of stick the skin back over the bone. And I get it, and I swim back over to my boat, and I climb out. And I go, Kevin, get me into the hospital. So we drive 20 minutes back, and I drive fast in the dock. Everybody's cussing at me for driving fast, and I tell them to where they can go. And I get out, and here comes the ambulance. We called via cell phone, which I wish I wouldn't. The thing drove 45 miles an hour and motion sickness down those roads for like an hour or 45 minutes. We get to the hospital, and I walk in, and my finger's basically chopped off. Still numb to this day. And I'm watching illegal aliens with stomach aches and stuff, literally. And they're nice little folks, little cowboy hats, and they're sitting there and all this, and they're just about an hour and 30 minutes into this, I got full insurance card. In fact, bring my wallet over to me, guys. I want to show them my insurance card. It pays like 85% through my radio network I work for. And I'm sitting there, and I call my dad. He's on the way, and he's an oral surgeon, knows a little bit about stuff. He's worked in trauma, hospitals, on car wrecks and stuff on Jaws. He says, no, you need to get that attached right now. So I walk over and I go, listen, I'm Alex Jones, and I've been over here 3 times, and I see these illegal aliens going in. You get me a doctor, and you get me one right now, and you reattach this finger. And you know what? I got service, and I watched all those blacks and whites and Hispanic Americans. That place was full. It was like a Sunday. That's when the regular hospitals and stuff are closed, so the emergency room gets a lot. And I got service. I got service, and I got to keep my finger. So don't believe me, sir, I know. This is the real numbers. Did you know in Utah, Colorado, some areas of Texas, but it's city, California's the worst. Illegal aliens and immigrants get more tuition than in-state residents. They get more welfare. They get everything. They get to drive without insurance. They are, because the government wants an incentive to bring them here. Did you know that all of the money paid illegals, they've got federal numbers on this, doesn't even compare, all the money they're even making, forget the taxes they're paying, doesn't compare to the amount of welfare that they're paid, that they're given. Look, fine, let all the illegal aliens stay. Just don't wrap yourselves in Mexican flags. Don't say this is Mexico. Don't say you plan to kill us as soon as possible. And government, give them free health care to get cured of TB. No, it's just we don't care. We're just going to do it. Here's my Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. Look at that. I don't want to show too much of that. You'll get my... Well, I guess there's no real personal numbers on here, actually. But there it is. The point is I pay a lot of money for this insurance, and this didn't mean anything. This was like toilet paper. If my name was Juan Lopez or my name was Dergipa Gluber, as long as I was a foreigner, my name was Shaka Zulu, man, I'd be right in the front of the line. Oh, and then I had full insurance, paid the little deductible or all, and it's on my credit, the $500 ambulance drive. I paid for it, and I've sent letters, and they don't care. They say I owe them for the ambulance ride. But if I was an illegal alien, no problem. Absolutely no problem. Everything would be peachy keen. Go ahead, caller.
About the college thing. You know that illegal aliens, they get in-state tuition, but they're international. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
If you come out of state, it's like 3 times the tuition. But they get in-state. And anyway, in a way, you got to kind of admit, it's kind of poetic justice what's happening to America, looking at how, people have been treated, you know what I'm saying? Not that I'm for it, but in a way, it's kind of like karma or whatever you want to call it.
No. I mean, listen, you have to understand, sir, people are slaves. They're not called slaves. They are slaves in Africa in most countries with black leaders. People are slaves in the Middle East in most countries. People are slaves in Eastern Europe still. People are slaves in China. America's not perfect, okay? But I've looked at other systems. Again, the big media, which is literally the great-grandsons and great-great-great-grandsons of the slave owners, they're the money. Only a fraction of whites own slaves. Did you know that? And most whites were sharecroppers. I had ancestors that came here as indentured servants. That meant you were a slave for 7 years, and then you never got off the plantation. So notice our media tells us how bad America is to replace it with a new America that is bad. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Like your show, and you should have been one of the first persons to be seen in that ER because I'm a trauma nurse, and that was an emergency. That's obvious.
No, I'm sitting there for over an hour, and literally. I was like, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? They serve the illegal aliens first. Why is that?
Anyway, sorry about that. But anyway,
well, no, but you're a trauma nurse. Do you work at a private hospital?
Yes, I did trauma, so.
Yeah, because the illegal aliens go to the city.
Regardless what color you are.
Sure.
Anyway, would you ever do a show like if Bush or whoever, America tried to invade Iran? I mean, they're going to start World War III, and for sure, China and Russia are not going to be on our side. I
talk about it every day on the radio from 11 to 2 Central, and it's it's horrible what's happening. And are you still there? She's gone. No, that's a great thing to do a show on. I mean, I just talked about it briefly earlier. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, Alex.
Yes.
Did you hear about the federal government's plan for dealing with the bird flu today?
I did hear about it about a week ago. Barbed wire around cities, massive funeral pyres, dump trucks full of dead bodies, total martial law.
Well, yeah, they said they're going to restrict our travel. They're going to call out the National Guard to control us, but then they said, they're going to specifically leave the borders open because it's too much of a logistical problem to shut them down.
Oh, no. We're all going to be prisoners. The border stays open.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're getting right in our face with it and starting to look more and more like they're getting ready to do something.
You know, they may not now. They like to just talk about it forever, and then and certainly if it does happen, clearly that's a whole other discussion. It'll be a government op, and I do believe our government will detonate an atomic weapon in America. I do believe our government will release a bioweapon, probably nothing we've ever heard of, and their own documents say that's their smokescreen for bringing in martial law. They could have a bio release that only kills a few hundred, a few thousand. Claim that martial law defeated it in a major city to kind of beta test it, then sell us that martial law keeps you safe, and then do it on a wider scale the next time to bring in even more control. They move very incrementally, very carefully.
Yeah, I just thought, you know, it's like they're going to imprison us, but let all the illegal aliens keep coming here, bringing who knows what.
I know, my friend. I was driving here to this studio about 2 hours ago, listening to KLBJ 590. You probably heard it. And it was former head of the National Security Agency, General Bobby Inman, was speaking at the big telecommunications conference that Colin Powell's attending. And they said that we will accept a national ID card very soon. But Inman said that it will only be after another terror attack because Americans want their liberties. They don't understand they must give them up. I bet a lot of you heard it. And I was like, what? Every time I go see one of them speak or we get video of it, RFID is good. Biometrics is good. Give up your rights. They're telling you, okay, you can have your liberties, but you're going to die. Oh, you got attacked. We're going to take them for your own good. The average American doesn't know they already implemented a national ID card. It already happened. The states piecemeal had implemented it 93, 94, 95, 96. Texas was the first, the beta test, 1993. Now they're implementing it nationwide under something called the Real ID Act. But they know the general public isn't aware, so they just keep saying, for your safety, we'll be needing this. See? All right. I'll take one more call, and then I've got to get into the Internet, the future of the Internet, how they plan to shut that down. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air. Go ahead, caller. Well, I'm just done with the calls at that point. Who knows? If I have time in the last few minutes, I may take a few more. Let me go over this. See, all of this information is so detailed that I don't want to sit here and spoon feed this to you. I just want you to find out about it. Now, I'm not here tooting my horn. I'm not a genius. I'm not even that smart. I just know world history. I understand how elites have operated in the past. There's nothing like an itch you can't scratch, is there, folks? But I've studied elites. And I know what their plan is, their operation is. It's stated. You see, none of what they do is hidden because they have to communicate with each other. They put out manuals, they put out policies, they have conventions, they openly talk about it, but they know that the heads of the newspapers and the publishers that are at those meetings aren't going to go write about it, aren't going to make it a big issue because they're part of the system and it's in their own self-interest to go along with it. So I remember 4 years ago seeing an article in the London Guardian with the headline, "The Internet is Dead." And I've seen this headline over and over again. Then when Austin, a couple years ago, had Internet 2 meeting here, they said the Internet is dead. And then I found a CNN article from 1998 titled, "The Internet is Dead." And they say the same thing here, the same thing in the next, the same. You can read stuff 8 years old. And see, I didn't learn of this till 4 years later. So you're learning now. I learned 4 years ago. They were openly talking about it at 8. Here's one out of eSchool. Internet 2 aims to boost capacity. New developments could increase Internet 2 bandwidth capabilities up to 880-fold. Blah, blah, blah. Now, what do you learn when you go to these conferences? And I go to them. I'm not physically there, but I watch video clips off the conference own website. I read the minutes of their speeches. I can have 500 pages of speeches, say, on an Internet 2 website. from the Chicago Symposium, 5 years ago. And I can just type in keywords like peer-to-peer agreements, internet neutrality. I know the keywords, and it'll take me right to it. And then I can read it. And they openly say, this is the best way to give you the analogy, okay? And this is how they describe it. You've got I-35 that's a non-toll road. It's paid for. It works. They are going to take all the funds from that and put it into a new private road where you have no free speech, where you don't own your own website, where you have no control. It's the only place you can send emails for free. And on the old internet, emails cost money, no video, no audio transmission. And this is with regulations. It doesn't matter how much you crunch it or how much you compress it. It's just that's not allowed. Everything you do is logged on this internet. Everything is controlled. This other one is controlled by 40, they've expanded it, 40-plus colleges and 50 private corporations. The government, just like the Queen of England 500 years ago, would give to, say, her cousin the license for all halibut fishing or the license for all whale oil. Only you're allowed to traffic in it. Only you're allowed to sell it. Okay, it's total fascism where the government just hands out who can do what. And they say that they're going to end internet neutrality. Congress passed a law 2 weeks ago saying that if AT&T doesn't like your website because it's, quote, just competition, or any reason they wish, they can block you out of all their networks and not let your traffic go across their systems. 6-8 months ago, when Level 3 and Cogent, two big backbone providers, had a little squabble about 20% of the websites in the country were not accessible. Now, by that was 20+%. By that I mean you could get on the internet, but you couldn't go to about 20% of the websites that were out there. And I happened to have my servers at the wrong place in Dallas, so about half my people couldn't get to it. So what they do is the internet was just free. And by free, it still costs you your connection, and that's what you were paying for. It was free in its flow. It was organic. Everything was connected to everything. They can't stop you from going to sites you want to go to. In this new internet, too, I cannot have a website unless it's like MySpace. That's why MySpace is the future of the internet. Because they say under Internet 2, you'll have like a University of Texas Ed Austin / Q970843952 Alex Jones /. But just like MySpace, when I go get an account there, I have to sign an agreement. They admit on MySpace they don't let you post videos. Robots are looking at it. And I don't mean a physical robot. The programs are called robots. Robot spiders, algorithms, NSA type technology for keywords. It's scanning it. And then you can't post that on your own website because it isn't your own website. You don't think, seriously, national newspaper circulation, I said 40% last hour. Some are down over 60, but on average it's around 40. Just type in newspaper circulation down. You'll see an article, though, saying, oh, down 10% in the last year. That's the spin they put on it. You look at it in the aggregate over the last decade, it's over 40%. And that's with newspapers getting caught ballooning their subscription numbers. Do you think that the billions of dollars the Statesman used to makes tens of millions upon millions a year, and it's owned by Cox News Service that owns hundreds of papers and TV stations. They own interest in some stations. That's just one smaller media conglomerate. Don't you know they're lobbying to shut down the web and restrict it? They are. It's public. Don't you think Viacom, and don't you think that the parent company of Fox, and don't you think the parent company of ABC, Disney, NBC, parent company General Electric, don't you think that they're out there trying to shut the web down? Folks, when Infowars.com, run by one person, gets as many visitors as statesman.com, the establishment's in trouble. And InfoWars is one of my smaller sites now. When prisonplanet.com gets the same number of visitors, it's ranked the same by mainstream official rating services. When prisonplanet.com is as big as the DallasMorningNews.com, the New World Order is in trouble. There are thousands of sites as big as mine. In fact, you look at sites from 1,000 up to about 15,000, most of them are alternative news. Porn was the biggest thing on the web. And you look at how alternative news is very close to surpassing it. More people are checking out alternative news than are checking out the babes. This is official major university and government and corporate research. Number one, do you think they're going to let it go on forever? I put these TV shows on the web every week. It's much bigger than this TV show. I just use this as a studio and a place to do it, and we talk to the Austin audience. And I'm small in all of this. I'm just one guy. There's many of us fighting the globalist. Worldwide, it's happening. I'm sure you've heard about Yahoo and Google and all them blocking out anything criticizing China in China. We've already caught Google doing it here in the U.S. They're already doing it. You got to fight Internet 2. Never support Internet 2. You haven't even heard of it yet. Believe me, you're going to real soon. Whenever they shut down peer-to-peer agreements, whenever they shut down Internet neutrality, meaning they don't look at what's going on, everybody passes it back and forth, they're taking the net and saying, no, you're not allowed to be on it. No, only if you're a subscriber. There'll be AT&T's web, CNN's web, UT's web. Do you understand that? That they are openly taking the highway and shutting it down, and a 1,000-lane highway, and putting us on a 1-lane highway. And, I mean, email is free, folks. The amount of data in an email is, a millionth of a penny on average. I mean, it's even worse than that. I've seen the numbers. You're paying for it with your connection. We built the net. We drove the economy. We built the only boom America had left in telecommunications and the .com. The Internet's now bigger than it was before the 2000 .com bust. This is all admitted. We built it. We paid for it. It's ours. Do you think the brick and mortar stores like the Internet? No, they don't like it. The establishment is panicking. Openly, they say it. You ought to go read what they say. They say to keep control of us, they've got to shut it down. And they're going to do it. The Internet's going to start working worse and worse and worse. Don't worry. Pay just a higher subscription fee and get on Internet, too. It's fast, it's easy, it's great, and it's safe for your kids. Totally filtered and controlled by the government. That's what's happening. Go to prisonplanet.com. Just type into Google, Internet 2, prisonplanet.com. You'll get we've probably written about 15 articles on it the last few years. It's one of the issues we cover. It's one of the things we deal with. Go ahead, caller. Yeah, go ahead,
I just
sir.
wanted to compliment you on what you were doing, and it's so important that I have, when I get home at night and I turn on the TV, I go straight to 10 to see if you're on, as opposed to, watching Channel 2 or Channel 3 or any of these other channels. So I would much rather listen to you and get my information from you than to hear it from mainstream media.
Well, sir, the city and Time Warner are trying to shut access down. Right now, they're suing the city to shut it down. And the Internet, it looks like they're going to start shutting it down. And I know, I appreciate you watching, putting up with me, all our antics. We're just real people fighting the New World Order. I'm sorry the phone system's acting weird. We'll try to figure it out. But, yeah, Mike, I know they turn their TVs up too loud, but there's a way we tune it in there where that doesn't happen. I'm out of time. Look, if you want to be free, you're going to have to fight for it. If you don't want to be a slave, you're going to have to fight for it. I'll see you on the radio in 10 seconds at Infowars.com. God bless you all. Thanks, crew, for coming in. This is serious business.